A lot of people claim that the Ten Commandments is the basis of Western law and Western society.
Over the weekend, and with the approval of the county commissioners, a Ten Commandments monument was installed atop the steps of the Dixie County Courthouse.
And that's a bold claim, considering that really only 4 of them are actual laws that we hold in our legal system today. The rest have to do with taking a break and worshiping God and honoring your father and your mother and not wanting to covet and...
Wow, that's a lot of words. Too bad I'm not reading them.
These are things that we can't codify in law. So really only 4 out of the 10 are actual laws. But that's not what I think they mean. What I think they're getting at, maybe whether they know it or not, is that the Ten Commandments was the first legal system that I can find in history that had universal standards for every single person, regardless of class, regardless of race, regardless of wealth.
What did he say?
Yeah. Everyone adheres to the same law and everyone pays the same penalty. And that's what we're talking about this week. Hello all, I'm the Mad Pastor, and Christianity sucks. It's boring, it's out of date, it's irrelevant, but it doesn't have to be. Let me explain why. So we're continuing our march through the Ten Commandments, and we're going to do 4 of them in one video right now. I call them the social laws. So I'm going to be reading from Exodus chapter 20, verses 13 through 16, and they sound like this. They go real quick. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. So I like to quickly run through them and say, don't kill, don't cheat, don't steal, don't lie. That's an easy way to remember it. Now, those are pedantic, and we're going to talk about how those really shouldn't work exactly according to the literal definitions of all that. There's more depth going on, but there's 4 of them, so we got to go quick. So let's just get right into it. The first thing we got to talk about is the fact that there is no language. It's you shall not. Now, anybody who's worked with kids knows that anytime you say, hey, kid, don't go over there, what the kid hears is, that means I can be anywhere else in the entire universe except for over there. And they will push against every boundary. Even though they know what you mean is don't cross the street, they mean I can do anything as long as it's on this side of the street. They hear yes language as confining. So like if you want a kid to really stay in the yard, you say the only place you're allowed to be is in this yard. Anywhere outside of this yard is out of bounds. And they understand that. And now they're not pressing against this like freedom boundary. So my point in all of that is when you use thou shalt not language, you're essentially saying everything else is permissible except for this. It's really freedom giving. And that's important because you got to remember the Israelites just came out of Egypt where they were enslaved. So the idea that the law is freedom giving, the idea that they're using thou shalt not language rather than you have to language is the language of a slave. Thou shalt not language is the language of a free person. So that's important to note that all the social laws are language of a free person. Before we continue, I want to remind you that we, for the foreseeable future, are collecting funds for a group called Zoe Empowers. They quite literally empower communities with skills and entrepreneurial education to make their own businesses and make an economy and a living in their own community. We've been assigned a community in Rwanda, and every dollar you give to this channel goes directly to helping those people. So please use the QR code over here or any of the links down below, or you can mail a check P.O. Box down below to Kindred UMC, and all of that will go to help the people in Rwanda that we are getting to know as we speak. So let's continue. All right, let's go through them one by one. You shall not murder. That murder word in Hebrew is raza with an R, but it's Hebrew, so it's not exactly an R. So it means specifically murder. It doesn't mean don't kill. And that's important because I've sat with many veterans who have been to war and who have taken human life, and they feel incredibly guilty about it. And of course you're going to feel guilty about that if you have a conscience. But that's not breaking a 10th commandment. As we see throughout the Old Testament, God is okay with killing in war as long as it is a justified war according to God's will, to free people, to stop child sacrifice, to instill goodness and truth and justice. God seems to be okay with that kind of killing, at least to some point. What's not okay is for you to go over to your neighbor and because they said something you don't like, you're going to inflict violence upon them and murder them. That is against the law. And of course, that makes sense. We can't have a society where anybody can just commit murder. So this is the basic rule, the basic starting place where we have to start. God and society needs to value human life, and it can't just be free for all. If you're stronger, you get to say whatever's right because of violence. That can't be the case. So, you shall not commit murder. Second, you shall not commit adultery. Now, this is interesting because, again, the language does not differentiate between women and men. And culturally, women were the only people who could commit adultery, and men could not. So it's interesting that this language does not use any gendered or anything. It just says, no, everyone not allowed to commit adultery. If you're married, you can only have sex with your married partner. Now, there is a caveat that we have to acknowledge, and that's that men could have multiple wives. So, it's a little, that's not a good look for us, but history will prove that our society kept moving forward, and eventually we got rid of polygamy, except in certain unique sects of Christianity. But let's ignore them and call them a cult, and let's stick to what is mainstream here. Okay, you shall not steal. This is important because they just came from Egypt where they were enslaved. Now, slavery is essentially you do the work, I get the reward, and like flat out. You don't even get a wage. I'll keep you alive as long as you keep working, but the minute you stop working, I'm going to stop feeding you. So slavery is a harsh, brutal reality, and the thou shalt not steal language really has more to do with the time and the wages, because in an agrarian culture, in a culture where they're nomadic and they're farming and they're hunting and they're gathering, property is a representation of your time and your work. If you want milk, you got to go milk a goat or a cow or whatever. If you want chicken for dinner, you got to go hunt and kill a chicken, or at least raise chickens so that you can have them. Same with goats, same with minerals. If you want metal, you have to mine that metal. If you want a tool, somebody has to make that tool with their hands, and it has to be over a burning furnace. And so you understand, property equals time. And they just came from being enslaved, so their time needs to be rewarded. So thou shalt not steal is closely related to every person who puts time and effort into their job should be rewarded and paid fairly for that. And that's a lesson we could really learn a lot from. I'm not sure we're doing a good job in the United States of adhering to that commandment very well. But there it is, right in one of the 10 commandments. Now, this final one, it's not the final commandment, it's number 9, but it's final on our list. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. So there's 2 things I want to talk about. One is bearing false witness. This is a specifically legal term. This is about saying your neighbor did something they didn't do, and specifically criminally. So there are certainly implications about don't lie. And Jordan Peterson has this great phrase where he says, tell the truth or at least don't lie. And I think that's a good thing to do, because you can't always tell the truth, because sometimes you don't know what the truth is. But tell the truth, at least don't lie. Don't bear false witness. And then the second part is equally important, against your neighbor. Don't turn against each other. Don't use deceit to turn your neighbors against each other. And don't turn against your neighbor and use deceit to paint them in a negative light. Be truthful about each other. Deal with each other honestly. This is, again, the basis of how you have a free, functioning, fair, and just society. I've said it before, I hit on it at the beginning, but it is worth closing the video talking about this. The reason that people are so obsessed with the 10 Commandments and how it relates to Western laws is because before the 10 Commandments, before the Hebrew Israelite law, it was common for there to be different consequences for different people, different rules for your level of wealth, level of status, your royalty or your peasantry, whatever it might be. If you are nobility and you steal a piece of bread, you pay a fine. If you are in the lower classes, you steal a piece of bread, you lose a hand. So different laws and different rules and different consequences for different levels of people. The Ten Commandments say, nope, everyone gets the same. And these social laws, don't kill, don't cheat, don't steal, don't lie, they apply to everyone equally. So when we think about Western society, free, democratic, republic representative societies, when we think about them, this is an important evolution in human society, that everyone suffers the same penalty for the same rules. No one is above the law. Now, we don't execute that personally in the United States, I can say for sure. It's not a perfect execution on that. But it's our ideal, and it's the standard that we should strive for, and it is rooted in the Bible. This is Yahweh's rules for our society and how we are to be with each other. Everyone suffers the same consequences for the same rules. Everyone gets a seat at the table. I've been the Mad Pastor. This has been the Social Laws and the Ten Commandments. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.